If those who are coming in the door right now could make it all the way through to this side of the room, we've got a line of people who are trying to get in. Chris, I'm going to make some brief as I can opening remarks, recognize some dignitaries, and then I'm going to get you guys back to the National League playoffs and the Democratic debate. So we just have folks who are coming in, continue to go through. Peter Spear, congratulations. Peter just got married to Stacy Hunt. Congratulations. Very happy for you. Thanks for joining us. This is part of his honeymoon, coming to the campaign kickoff. So let me do this. I want to recognize a few very special people who are dedicating their lives to public service right now and are here with us. I have Judge Laura Strathman, Judge Carlos Villa, Judge Sergio Enriquez, Judge Mike Herrera. I have City Rep Claudia Ordaz. I've got County Commissioner David Stout, County Commissioner Vince Perez, County Commissioner Carlos Leon, Mayela Mejia, who I believe is an elected precinct chair, Carlos Carrasco, also a judge, Kenna Ramirez, a precinct chair, Al Velarde, a trustee at El Paso Independent School District, Susie Bird, his fellow trustee, Shane Haggerty, a county commissioner, and Veronica Escobar, one of my all-time heroes, our county judge. Veronica, where are you? Veronica has an appointment that she's got to keep, but I wanted to make sure that I recognize her. And Veronica, you're welcome to leave at any time. But before she does, let me just say this. When we first started to run for Congress almost 4 years ago, it was 2011, about this same time of year, very few people thought that it was possible. And it was a very small team of people, some of whom are here, some like Veronica Escobar, some like David Wysong, who's not here, but I see his parents here tonight, and so many other people. I see Josh Hunt in the back, who took a chance on what we were proposing and what we wanted to do for this community. And through a lot of hard work, through, I think, a very well-run campaign, not by me, but by the people who had volunteered to run that campaign, by very generous El Pasoans who wanted to give to me so that I could, with them, give back to this community. And with, frankly, a whole lot of luck, we pulled off an amazing upset in 2012 to secure this opportunity to serve the community. So I want to begin by thanking all of you who are here, so many of whom were here 4 years ago and 3 years ago and 2 years ago and along the entire path so that we could be here tonight. So I want to thank you. I want to thank TJ, who's behind the bar, and along with his brother Luke, owns this place, for hosting us tonight. Susie for helping to organize and to put this on. Please make sure you buy a drink and that you tip generously tonight. And after I finish, have another drink. TJ's going to put on the Democratic debate after I get finished here on this soapbox. So TJ, thanks for having us here. Let me also thank my family. This is my son Henry, who's right here sharing the box with me. I saw Amy. Amy's right here. And are Ulysses and Molly here? So Ulysses and Molly are around here somewhere. Listen, this is an incredible job. I really love it. It's certainly hard, but it's not harder on anyone than it is on Amy and our kids. It's time that they don't have with me. It's time that Amy's got the kids by herself. And then on top of all that, she puts up with me. So Amy, thank you for making all this possible. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank my district staff, most of whom are here tonight, as well as the interns. These are the unpaid volunteers who spend a good chunk of their week working for you to make sure that we connect people who need help in DC or El Paso, become their advocates, and get things done for them. And I really try to do a good job of separating the political events like tonight and then our business, what you elected us to do. And so there's a pretty strong wall between the political side and the work of our office. But I wanted Cynthia, our district director, and her team to be here tonight because I wanted to say thank you to them. Cynthia, where are you? She's almost always there when I need her. This may be the one. She's outside trying to help people get in. That's textbook Cynthia. But she and her team are absolutely amazing, and the success that we've had so far in almost 3 years of being in office are exclusively owed to Cynthia, her team, David in Washington, D.C., and his team. You just have to take my word for it if you haven't worked with them already. We have a phenomenal team of El Pasoans working for you day in and day out. And so I just wanted to thank them as well. Many of them are here. So thank you guys for everything that you do. I don't want to leave any electeds out, so I see that we have Peter Schwartzbein here, District 1 City Rep, and then I see Pablo Lopez right in front of him, who is the president of the Southside Neighborhood Association. Pablo, Peter, thank you all for being here as well. Listen, let me just give you a quick overview of some of what we've done over the last almost 3 years. I was looking at the numbers earlier today, and in Cynthia's shop here in El Paso at the Mills Building just down the street, we've helped 4,000, more or less, different El Pasoans who've come in who have an issue with the federal government. It's a veteran who was injured in service, and because of that service-connected injury, can no longer work or cannot work at 100% employment and needs some help and is waiting on an answer back from the federal government and many times does not receive that answer. Our team helps them to get that answer, becomes their advocate, and ensures that they're connected with whatever they have earned in service. We have Social Security beneficiaries, Medicare beneficiaries, folks who have a problem with the IRS. You got to pay your taxes first, but once you do that, we'll help you if you got a problem. People who have immigration issues, visa issues. Somebody just came up to me tonight and said, I have a friend who I want you to meet today because unless you do and unless you're able to help him, he'll be deported tomorrow. We help on those cases all the time, and Mario Porras is here, and he works weekends, he works Christmas, he works New Year's. He ensures that we do everything we can for the people who are most vulnerable, who need our help. So we have 4,000 cases. We have responded to 50,000 letters in our office written by perhaps people like you on any number of issues, and we respond to all of them. We get back to everybody within 2 to 4 weeks. So 50,000 pieces of mail. That's my team working for El Paso. We've returned about $2 million annually to this community. Those are in benefits delayed or benefits denied or wages earned that the recipient or the likely recipient was not able to get until we intervene. This is a team in El Paso that's just really cranking for this community. And on top of that, we do something here that we don't see in most other congressional districts. We hold an all-comers, no-holds-barred town hall each and every single month in this community. And if you've never been to one, please come. You'll find that your fellow citizens are not shy about their beliefs. They don't hesitate to tell me when they think I'm screwing up. There's never a difficult question not asked. And it's a great chance for the community to understand what's going on, and a great chance for me to become a better representative by listening to you and understanding that everything I do in El Paso, in Washington, D.C., is something that I will be held accountable for by you. And that makes me a better representative. And so I want to thank all of you who've come out to those town hall meetings. In D.C., we're voting on tons of legislation, 1,700 votes that we've taken over these last 3 years. I am probably a subject matter expert in about 2 or 3 of those different subjects. And so David and his team in DC make sure that I'm prepared, informed, educated, and that I make the best possible decision for this community and for this country. And we've written some legislation. Right when I got in, there's something crawling up my leg, and it's my son, Henry. Right when I got in, we were facing this thing called the sequester, which are these across-the-board cuts that affect every federal agency. And because of a spouse of a Fort Bliss soldier who called us, we found out that included in those cuts were the tuition reimbursement benefits that are paid out to every active duty service member. This is up to $4,500 a year that a service member has earned to apply to their education at UTEP or the community college or Tri-State Cosmetology or wherever it is that they want to earn their education to become more competitive, to become an active participating member of this community when they transition out. That entire benefit, the $4,500, was completely cut. And so we wrote a bill to restore that at 100%. And our co-sponsor after we wrote it was, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a guy named Joe Wilson from South Carolina. The only way I knew who Joe Wilson was when the president was delivering the State of the Union in 2009 or 2010. Joe Wilson famously yelled out, "You lie," and then raised $1 million off of being the guy who hates the president. If I had to pick one person who I thought I would never work with in Congress, it was Joe Wilson of South Carolina. And yet, he was on the Armed Services Committee and the perfect person with whom to partner to ensure that these benefits, which 31,000 active duty soldiers in Fort Bliss depend on, were restored. And in fact, he and I working together got it back into the budget, signed by the president, and that money came back to those who've earned it and deserve it in this community. That came from listening to people in this community. We also were able to, and working with people like Peter and Claudia and the city council and the mayor and the city manager of El Paso, we were able to pass something in Congress that allowed local communities like El Paso to get their bridges running the way they're supposed to be when the federal government can't get its act together to do its job. It's a Chapter 560 agreement. And we worked with Henry Cuellar, we got it introduced in the House, we got it passed in the Senate, we got that signed into law. We also wrote a bunch of good legislation that never went anywhere. We wrote this thing called the Cross-Border Enforcement, Accountability, and Community Engagement Act. Really snappy title that would have ensured that we support our Border Patrol agents, that they get extra training, that they get the transparency and oversight necessary so that the good ones elevate and the bad apples are out of the service, that we protect the rights of people who live in border communities like ours, and that we apply our perspective and our experience and our knowledge to an issue that we understand better than anyone else. And we filed that bill with Steve Pierce, a Republican out of New Mexico. We filed other legislation with Republicans. We filed great VA stuff, great DOD stuff, great budget stuff, but we faced a problem. This is perhaps the least productive Congress in American history in the last 230 years. To the point today that you have a hard time keeping a speaker in office and having anybody who's crazy enough to take the job. So what we did when we started this session of Congress is we asked ourselves, is there a better way to do this job? Is there a more effective way to do this job? And out of that came some things that I think are going to be good for El Paso and good for this country. Let me give you 3 examples. The first is on the VA. The VA has been screwed up in this community for longer than I've been in office. In 2008, the El Paso Times headline screams, "El Paso VA, worst in country." This summer, the El Paso Times headline says, "El Paso VA mental health care wait times, worst in country." Now, what does that mean? It means that the tax dollars that you send into Washington, D.C. are not being used effectively. It means that we're not supporting our veterans after they've put their lives on the line, after they've been hurt, serving this country in combat or service, and now they're back in our community. But most importantly, and most tragically, especially with mental health care, we're finding in El Paso that care delayed becomes care denied, turns into very tragic outcomes and consequences for veterans and their families. And Cynthia and I have met with too many mothers and spouses and survivors of veterans who've taken their own lives in this community as a direct consequence of not being able to access mental health care. So we've written legislation to fix this. We've talked to Bob McDonald, the head of the VA. We're talking to our other committee members, but that alone is not going to fix it. So what we did, what El Paso did, is we worked with the mental health care providers here, the private care providers, the public care providers at UMC, with the VA in El Paso, and we wrote a business plan to transform the El Paso VA, first and foremost, so that that veteran coming back from Afghanistan who has post-traumatic stress disorder can get in to see somebody when he or she needs to, and continues to see them and gets the care that they need and the outcomes that they've earned and that they deserve. But most excitingly, this here in El Paso, what we came up with could serve as the model nationally to fix a VA that's badly broken, not just in El Paso, but throughout the country. That's an example of how we're not waiting on legislation, waiting for Congress to be fixed. We're taking matters into our own hands and beginning to fix the problems here, and hopefully that extends nationally. When you look at the fact that we are the largest binational community anywhere in the world, 3 million people who share this border in Ciudad Juarez and in El Paso, who speak English and Spanish, share two cultures, families that cross both sides of the border, an economy that's fully integrated, $90 billion in trade passing through our ports of entry every year, 30 million lawful, purposeful crossings with documents in this community. You recognize that when the border is performing, when it's healthy, when it runs the way it should, it creates jobs, it improves our quality of life, it renews the essence of who we are and why we're here in the first place. And when it doesn't, life becomes that much harder. It's that much more difficult to create jobs and economic growth. Quality of life diminishes. We aren't treating people with the dignity and respect that they deserve. So we've written legislation to fix this, and we've introduced it with Republican John Cornyn, senator, that would put 5,000 Customs and Border Protection agents on the border. But that is not likely to pass at a time that the leading Republican presidential candidate describes Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals and thugs, and proposes to build a wall that extends the 2,000 miles of the border, and is not laughed off the stage, but instead is increased in popularity across the country. So when we talk about the border in a logical, rational, humane way, about treating people with respect and dignity, that unfortunately today is falling on deaf ears. And we can write the most perfect bill that has ever been written and introduced, and it will go nowhere in this environment. So what are we doing to change that? Again, by working with the community. We hosted a binational summit this summer, at UTEP. And we had leading cabinet secretaries from the US and from Mexico meeting here in El Paso and in Ciudad Juarez. We had leading academics and thinkers and artists and cultural leaders here in this community celebrating the fact that we're the safest community anywhere in the world, not in spite of, but because of the number of migrants who live here, because of the fact that we're conjoined with Mexico, because we're the most beautiful, amazing place that most people in this country have never visited and know nothing about. And that story not only echoes through this community, that story is then shared by people in Washington, D.C., and New York City, and Chihuahua, and Mexico City. And slowly but surely, we begin to move in the right direction, and we begin to contribute to a different image and perception of the border. We worked with Eric Pearson at the Community Foundation and started a 10K run. Starts in downtown El Paso, goes through Ciudad Juarez, and finishes on the International Bridge, the Paso del Norte Bridge. The international boundary is the finish line. 1,000 people signed up and ran in that race, and a large percentage of them were not from El Paso and were not from Juarez originally. And so for many of them, for the first time, they're seeing the border, this place that they have been taught to be afraid of, to be anxious about, to be concerned about, and it was absolutely beautiful. And people were cheering them on, and they found what we already know and what we take for granted, that we live in a truly remarkable place. So that's an example of this community beginning to change things without waiting for Congress to be fixed and without waiting for a magic solution to be delivered by someone else. And lastly, so many of you have been so generous with your time and with your money. And it takes money to run these campaigns, and it takes money to successfully stay in Congress. And it's part of the problem with this institution. Unfortunately, money has become so corrosive and so decisive that it is now determining the legislation that we work on, the votes that we take, and the very direction of this country. And so with your help, this Congress, I have joined 2 other members of Congress out of 535 who are no longer taking corporate money, who no longer take PAC money, who do not accept super PAC money, and who are relying solely on the contributions of people like you in this room. In fact, of the 535 members of Congress, last session of Congress, we raised more money from our own district than any other member of Congress, bar none. And you would think that we would be outraised as a proportion of total raised by the folks from Manhattan, from Palm Beach, from Beverly Hills, from Las Vegas. No, it was El Paso, Texas. People who were given at $5, $25, $100 a time supported a campaign that was successful. And instead of waiting for this perfect legislation, and I've already co-sponsored that legislation that would reform campaign finance, instead of waiting for the Constitution to be amended so that corporations are not recognized as citizens and not given the power of free speech through money, we are trying to model the campaign that other members of Congress can follow. And so all of them say that the money disgusts them, that if they didn't have to do this and this weren't the system, they wouldn't participate in it, but they don't have a choice. We're trying to show them, you are, frankly, from what you have done in this campaign, you are showing them that there's another way to do this. There's a far more ethical way where representatives respond to and seek input from and support from the people they represent instead of the corporations and the interests who have legislation before them on their committees and their responsibilities as members of the House. So this is another example of El Paso leading, of not waiting for somebody to come up with a solution from somewhere else, and perhaps, hopefully, maybe it's not too much to hope for, setting the model, defining what the future will look like for democracy in this country. And that's coming out of here. And so that's why I'm so excited to be here with you to tell you that I'm going to run again for a third term. And that's why I'm so grateful to have your support, because it is all of us who are harnessing the wisdom and the experience and the perspective of this community to make the most of the opportunities that are before us and to leave no doubt in anyone's mind who's paying attention to El Paso that those things that make this community great are the very things that make America great. So thank you all for your support, for being here tonight. Please stay, buy another drink at the bar, support Grey Dog, watch the debate with us later, and I look forward to working with you on the campaign trail. Thank you.